guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am so excited to share 20 of my favorite fantasy romance authors that I am dying to meet at ApollyCon, as well as my favorite book by each author, and also discussing some of their newest releases that I cannot wait to read. Alright guys, so if you're unfamiliar with ApollyCon, it is a fantasy romance book convention that takes place in Washington, DC, normally around mid-April, and it's hosted by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I went for the first time last year, and it was the most amazing experience. It was just so cool to meet some of my favorite fantasy romance authors, get to take pictures with them, and then also meeting some fellow content creators that I've been friends with for years, but I had never met. So it was just so fun, and I was so unbelievably bummed when I was unable to get a ticket. So the reason this video is coming out so late is because I just found out I was going to be able to go to ApollyCon about 2 weeks ago. So that is why the timing of this video is a little out there. But anyway, I am still so excited to talk about some of my favorite fantasy romance authors and their upcoming releases, as well as some of my favorite books by them. And there's also a few authors in here that I have not read yet, but they're going to be at ApollyCon, and I cannot wait to meet them. So if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Patreon, and Goodreads, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about some of my favorite fantasy romance authors. So first up we have Olivia Rose Darling. I am going to fangirl so hard. So the only book I've read by her is Fear the Flames. This was actually one of my top reads of last year. I could not put this book down. So if you're unfamiliar with the story, we are following Princess Elwyn, and when she is born, she ends up bonding with dragons. But because of a prophecy that came out prior to her birth, her father believes that she will spell doom for his entire kingdom. So he ends up locking her up and ripping her dragons away from her. Now, Elwyn is able to escape, however, she has to leave her dragons behind. So she kind of starts like a secret kingdom on her own, but she is desperate to go back to her dragons and be connected to them again. So she ends up having to reluctantly agree to join up with a commander who is one of her father's biggest enemies, and together with a few other people, they are going to try to perform a heist and get Elwyn's dragons back. I loved this so much, and this is a special edition. I'm gonna be honest, the ink pages is where this is from, and I love this edition. It also has gorgeous artwork on the inside, both sides, and then these really pretty sprayed edges, but I cannot wait to meet Olivia Rose Darling. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so cool. And next up, we have L.J. Andrews. Now, I've read a few series by her, the first one being A Curse of Shadows and Thorns. I read the first book in that series, and I did enjoy it, but I never continued. And then the other one is the Everking duology, the Everking and the Everqueen. If you like dark fantasy romance, set on the water, definitely has like a pirate vibe, highly recommend. But today I want to talk about her upcoming release, which is Broken Souls and Bones. I cannot wait for this book to release. I'm really hoping she has copies at ApollyCon. Probably not, but I need to read this book. So my friend Carrie actually has a spoiler-free review that I'll leave down in the description if you want a full spoiler-free review of this book. But all I know about this is we are following a girl named Lyra, and she is trying to keep her magical abilities a secret from this magic-obsessed king, and all of that kind of comes crumbling down when an enforcer for the king ends up finding out that she has magical abilities, and in order to save her best friend, she has to admit to it. And then I think it's like a budding romance between the two, the enforcer and our main character. But any sort of Viking-inspired fantasy romance, I know I'm going to be obsessed with. Those are some of my favorite types to read. So another book I am so looking forward to reading, and I cannot wait to meet L.J. Andrews. And next up, we have Karina Halle. Now, I have read a ton of books by Karina Halle. I think my favorites are Black Sunshine, which is a vampire witch romance, and then Blood Orange, which also happens to be a vampire and witch romance, and then River of Shadows, which is kind of like an underworld enemies to lovers. All of the books I've read by Karina Halle, I've really enjoyed. But I never read Realm of Thieves, and that is a book I'm gonna try to squeeze in before ApollyCon. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I'm gonna try my best. Apparently this is like a dragon romantasy. We're following this girl, Brynlin, And after escaping a fanatical dragon cult, she has to steal dragon eggs to survive, which is apparently very, very dangerous. And she ends up being caught and kidnapped and then blackmailed by a lord who wants to use her dragon theft egg abilities to help him somehow, I guess, save his kingdom or something along those lines. And I believe it's an enemies to lovers romance, so I'm assuming it's going to be a romance between the two of them. But once again, I just love Karina Halle's writing, and normally her books are pretty fast-paced, so I can binge them fairly quickly, but another author I cannot wait to meet. And next up, we have Carissa Broadbent. Now, I have met Carissa Broadbent in the past. However, I was so nervous. I don't think I said a single word to her. My husband was with me last year at ApollyCon, and he did most of the talking. And unfortunately, he's not going to be joining me this year. So I am going to have to learn to talk to these authors without completely freezing up. We'll see how this goes. Practice makes perfect. But anyway, some of my favorite books by Carissa Broadbent are The Six Scorched Roses, which is a novella that is set in the same world as Serpent and the Wings of Night. Now, this is the best novella I've ever read. It somehow feels slow burn. We're following this girl that since she was born, she knew she was dying. However, all of the people in her community are also slowly dying from this god curse. Now, the only way for her to break the curse is by using vampire blood to try to figure out a cure. Now, the only vampire is Vale, so she ends up going to Vale and says, I will give you 6 roses in exchange for vials of your blood, and it's their romance. And it was so, so good, so I absolutely love this. And then we have Serpent and the Wings of Night. I have talked about this book so many times on my channel, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but this is a fantasy romance, vampires, trials, enemies to lover. It's so, so good. I actually like the second book, Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, just a little bit more, but both of them are amazing. And then last up, we have Slaying the Vampire Conqueror. This is following a girl that when she was younger, she was an orphan, so she ended up joining a cult in order to survive, and this cult ended up taking away her eyes, but in exchange, she's now able to see the threads of fate, so that's how she kind of interacts with the world. And then she ends up being tasked with infiltrating this war unit and becoming the seer for a vampire conqueror, and then eventually killing him, and it's their romance. I love this. I thought it was so unique and so bingeable. I could not put this down. So those are 3 of my favorite books by Carissa Broadbent. And next up, we have Eva Chase. And now I think she typically writes wide shoes. I read Thief of Silver and Souls early last year, and I think I ended up giving that 4 stars. That's a wide shoes fantasy romance that has a bit of a mystery element. But one I really want to read, I'm probably not going to get to it before ApollyCon, but still, is A Game of Veils. I've heard such good things about this book, and I've had it on so many TBRs, and I keep forgetting to pick it up, but I am determined. This is following a girl that never expected to have a very prominent marriage, so she's very surprised when her father tells her that she is going to try to compete to win the hand of the king's eldest son. So when she gets to the kingdom, she finds out that she actually has to compete in these very deadly trials in order to win the prince's hand. And on top of that, there are these princes that are being fostered in this kingdom, and they have a lot of animosity towards our main character. Not exactly sure why, but I think it's going to be a wide shoes romance between all of the princes and our main character. And that sounds so good to me. So another book that I'm going to hopefully read before ApollyCon, but if not, I will be reading in May. And one of my highest priority authors is Callie Hart, the author of Quicksilver. This is one of the best fantasy romances I have ever read. I am going to lose it when I meet Callie Hart. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. Still doesn't feel real, but in the story, we are following Saris, and Saris lives in this very desert-like kingdom, and she is a thief under the Undying Queen's rule. So, like I said, she's living as a thief, but one day she ends up being captured, and she is almost killed, but during this altercation, she accidentally opens up a realm, and out of this realm comes Kingfisher. He is a dark, brooding fae, and he brings Saris to the Fae realm, where he accidentally bonds her to him, and now he wants to use her alchemic magic in order to manipulate a certain compound that he believes can save his people. And there's so much more to it than that. There's also an adorable animal companion, and this is like the perfect dark fantasy romance. The second book, Brimstone, is releasing later this year. I'm dying for that book, but oh my gosh, I cannot believe I am going to meet Callie Hart in a week. And next up is Nalini Singh. Now, admittedly, I have never read any of their titles. However, I've seen Angel's Blood kind of going around. And actually, when I went to the Rip Bodice with some of my friends, we were discussing that title. I almost bought it because I heard it's what inspired SJM to write ACOTAR. So I'm not sure if that's true. I just heard it, I think, on TikTok or something like that. But either way, I am very curious. So I actually am currently reading Angel's Blood. I just downloaded the audio and started it. I'm like 2 chapters in while I'm filming this. But this is going to be one that I do read before ApollyCon. Now, this was released, I think, back in 2010, so it definitely has that kind of old school fantasy romance feel to it. We are following a vampire hunter who ends up being offered a job by an archangel named Raphael to hunt down a angel that has turned bad. And that is all I really know. So I'll let you guys know during my wrap up what I end up reading it. But I am very interested, and another author I cannot wait to meet. And the author that I will be very safely speed walking to the moment those doors open is Melissa K. Roehirch. I really, really want the Reign of Shadows and Ending Special Edition. Since I did not know I was going to ApollyCon, I did not pre-order it, but I did hear she's going to have a few available, so this will be the first author that I, once again, very safely speed walk to. I cannot believe I'm going to meet her. This is one of my favorite series of all time, and just, it is so good. If you have not read this yet, it is a very dark fantasy romance. Check trigger warnings. It does play around with the captor-captive trope, so it's not going to be for everyone. But in the story, we are following Tessa, and Tessa lives in a world where the gods granted power to the Legacy, and the Legacy rule over the Fae. Our main character, Tessa, is a Fae, and when she comes of age, she is chosen to become the primal source to the Heir of Endings. Now, Tessa does not want this because it means she is going to be forced to have these tattoos placed on her, and it's essentially a forced mating bond to the Heir of Endings, so he will be able to hear her thoughts, feel when she's near, and she will even become attracted to him physically and somewhat emotionally. So obviously, this feels like a huge, pry into your personal life. She just does not want anything to do with it. So it's really about Tessa trying to get out of this situation, find her own autonomy because everyone is trying to use her. And I love this story. The second book also so good. It is filled with so much action, different paranormal creatures, and I love this. So once again, cannot wait to meet Melissa K. Roehirch. Okay, so next up is J.R. Ward, obviously known for Black Dagger Brotherhood, which I have never read. And honestly, let me know if you know my reading taste. Do you think it's worth me starting? Because I know, one, it is 23 books long, which is insane. But also, I know the books released a while ago, so I don't know if I'm going to enjoy them. But also, I know it is being adapted into either a movie or a TV show. But it's also being adapted by Passionflix, so I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to end up watching it. But either way, I feel like this is a series that I need to give a try. Now, I don't know very much about this. I believe we're following a vampire named Wrath, and he is the only pure-blood vampire left. And he wants to get revenge on the people that killed his family centuries ago. And then one of his closest friends ends up passing away, leaving a daughter orphaned. And this daughter doesn't realize that she is half vampire, I'm assuming. And I don't know if it's going to be a romance between them or who the romance is with, but I have seen these covers everywhere. And once again, it's an unbelievably popular series. So I don't think I'm going to read it before ApollyCon, but it is a series I think I do want to give a try. And next up, we have Jeneane O'Reilly. She's the author of the How Does It Feel series. Now, this is a dark fantasy romance series that I have talked about a lot on my channel, but this is essentially following this girl that when she was younger, she believed she saw a fae, so now when she grew up, she became obsessed with animals with wings, and she ends up looking for a moth that's endangered, and while trying to find it, she ends up in the Unseelie Court, where she is almost killed multiple times by the Prince of the Unseelie Court. It is their romance. It is super, dark, and if you've read Fortuna Sword, it kind of has, that sort of world vibe, and I loved the Unseelie Court. So far, this is my favorite book in the series, by far. This second book has a very different tone to it, but I am very excited to read book 3. I've had it on multiple TBRs. I just still haven't gotten to it, but I'm hoping to read it at the end of April, the beginning of May. But Jeneane O'Reilly is another author I cannot wait to meet. And next up is actually a monster romance author, and I'm pretty sure it's a husband and wife duo, but it is Tiffany Roberts. Now, the only series I've read by them is Ensnared. This is a spider romance, and I never in a million years would have picked this up on my own. I ended up doing a reading vlog with Jen from the Book Refuge where we picked books for each other. She picked this for me. I was scared. I ended up loving it. I think it was my favorite book in that entire vlog. So in this story, and once again, this is not going to be for everyone. We have a spider as the main love interest. I know, it's odd. But in this, we were following Ivy, and Ivy is a human who is traveling to a different planet to start a new life. Now, while traveling, her spaceship ends up crash landing on a planet that's inhabited by spiders. So our main guy is Catan, and he is a spider that is living on this planet who happens to stumble upon Ivy, and it's their romance, and it's honestly adorable because they cannot speak the same language in the beginning, so they're kind of like miming to each other. But I never in a million years thought I would be okay with a spider-human romance, but I really, really loved this. Now, I do believe Tiffany Roberts is going to have a companion book to this series. I know one's releasing. I don't know if she's going to have it available at ApollyCon, but we're following another spider and human romance of a human that we meet in this series. So I am so excited to finally meet Tiffany Roberts. And last year, I met Casey Bond, and I picked this book up on a whim, and it was one of my top reads of last year. So this is The Last Lost Girl. It's kind of like a Peter Pan reimagining. It's one of the best I've read. We're following Ava, and she has been taking care of her kind of orphaned older sister. The two of them have been helping raise each other, essentially. And her sister has been slowly devolving into madness, and also has these episodes where shadows like come out of her, and it's all very scary. But anyway, Ava's sister is named Belle, and one day Belle has a complete breakdown and says she has to return to Neverland. Now, Ava is like, Neverland is not a real place. It does not exist. But to her shock, turns out it does. So Belle ends up taking Ava to Neverland. Obviously, we find out very early it is Tinkerbell, and they are separated upon entering Neverland. Well, Ava ends up being found by a guy with a hook who kidnaps her and tells her everything about Neverland, and Ava has to decide who she wants to trust. Now, while all this is going on, we also have Peter Pan kind of lurking in the background, and I love that this story really plays around with the amnesia trope, which is normally not one of my favorite types of tropes. But with this, when you're in Neverland, you slowly start to kind of lose your memory. So you don't really know what is true and what is false. So everyone is an unreliable narrator, and you never have any idea who you should really trust. And I cannot wait for the sequel. So once again, I'm really hoping she has the sequel available at ApollyCon. But if not, that will be one of the first books I read in May. And next up is Imani Erriu, and this is another author that unfortunately I have never read any of their books. I am so mad at myself that I have not read Heavenly Bodies yet. Had I known I was going to ApollyCon, I definitely would have made this a priority. I still might try to read it, but I don't know if I can fit all of these books in 7 days. But this is a fantasy romance that received so much hype when it was first released. This is following a girl that there is a prophecy that says that she will fall for a star and it will doom them both. I think stars are like gods or some evil being. So anyway, she ends up fleeing her kingdom, I think it's the kingdom of darkness, and goes to the kingdom of light, where she ends up meeting the prince of this kingdom, who wants to train her in how to kill the star and like defend her people. So I believe it's going to be a romance between the two of them, and it sounds really good. Once again, I think I will absolutely love this once I read it. So I'm going to try to read this before ApollyCon. And next up, we have Juliette Cross. Now, I met Juliette Cross last year, but at the time, I had only read her Wolf Gone Wild series, and I hadn't read any of her fantasy romances. But since I have read The Wraith King, which, oh my gosh, I love that book. Dark fantasy romance, has a bit of a captor feel to it. I will say I definitely liked the first half more than the second half, but still such a solid dark fantasy romance. And I am very much looking forward to reading Firebird by Juliette Cross. This is apparently set in like a Rome type setting, and we're following this, I believe he's a lieutenant, who ends up seeing this woman that he has longed for years. She used to be a dancer, and now he sees her across on a battlefield in danger, and he immediately shifts into his dragon form, which apparently was supposed to be kept secret, and it puts him in great peril, and it's their romance. But this is actually my Patreon book club pick for April, so I will definitely be reading this month, and I hope it lives up to the hype, because everyone is saying this book is amazing. And Penn Cole is another high priority author. She is the author of the Kindred's Curse Saga series, which is an adult fantasy romance series, super slow burn. If you like A Court of Thorns and Roses, you will probably love this. I am not caught up. I've only read the first 2 books, but I love this series. So in the story, we are following Diem, and Diem lives in a world where the gods have given power to the Descended, their children. So the Descended rule over the humans, and some of them are quite cruel. So the humans are living in poverty, and there's a bit of a rebel group that is starting to rise up. And Diem lives with her mother, who is a healer. Now, her mother is able to go into the Descended community because she is a healer, and one day her mother goes missing. So now Diem has to decide, does she want to align herself with the rebels, or does she want to go to the Descended, specifically the king's son, for help tracking down her mother? And it's Diem's story. Oh my gosh, so good, so addicting. So once again, another author I am so excited to meet. And next up is another monster romance author, Emma Hamm. Now, similar to some previous authors, I did meet Emma Hamm last year at ApollyCon, but I had not read any works by her, and I have since read Whispers of the Deep, which is kind of like a mermaid monster romance, and I think I ended up giving this 4 stars. So I'm very excited to have this signed by her. But in this story, we are following this girl that lives in an underwater community, and she ends up saving this mermaid, and because of this, he becomes very fascinated by her, and he ends up stealing her, and then brings her to this like underwater location where he just wants to keep her, but he soon realizes that that is not an option, and slowly there's a budding romance between them, and it has a bit of a Romeo and Juliet vibe because obviously their people hate each other, and they slowly fall in love. So this, I feel like, was very kind of sci-fi heavy in the beginning, which took me a while to kind of adjust to, but overall, a very fun read, and I cannot wait to continue with the series. And next up, we have Lizette Marshall. Now, A Court of Blood and Bindings is one of my favorite romantasy series, and I feel like I don't talk about it too often. It has fake dating, it is filled with slow burn romance, and I just love the characters in this. So in the story, we are following this girl that lives in the Human Isles, and the humans are controlled by the Fae. Now, the Fae control the humans because they possess color magic. They are able to pull colors to create magic. So if you wanted to heal someone, you would pull the color yellow. If you wanted to create destruction, you would pull the color red, or you could combine the colors to create unique magic. Now, the Fae are ruled over by the Mother, and she is super evil, and she has a henchman named the Silent Death. So one day, our main character goes to bed, and when she wakes up, her entire community is on fire, everyone is missing, and standing above her is the Silent Death himself, and he ends up whisking her away to the Fae Isles, and the story progresses from there. But I love the love interest in this. There's also a character that isn't able to use their voice, so our main character teaches them a form of sign language. And once again, fantasy romance with fake dating. I feel like you don't see that very often, but I love this series, so I know I'm going to absolutely fangirl when I meet Lizette Marshall. And of course, I cannot share an ApollyCon rec video without mentioning the host of ApollyCon, Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I have read quite a few series from Jennifer L. Armentrout, but From Blood and Ash is definitely my favorite, as well as the prequel Flesh and Fire series. If you're unfamiliar with From Blood and Ash, it is kind of a paranormal fantasy romance. We are following Poppy, who has been living in isolation as the Maiden, getting ready for her ascension, which is this secret ritual. Now, she is only allowed to talk to a few people, and other than that, she is really shielded from society. Now, one day she wants to go out and have a little fun, so she puts on a disguise and goes to the Red Pearl, which is a tavern where she ends up bumping into Hawk, who is this very attractive young man, the newest member of the Rise Guard, and they have a brief fling, and she is able to leave undetected, or so she thinks, because a few days later, Hawk ends up being chosen to be her personal guard, and slowly he brings Poppy into his world. It's their romance, and it is so addicting. So the story is filled with different paranormal creatures. We have wyvern, vampires, werewolves, shifters, everything you can imagine. The romance is so good, specifically in the first few books. I will say the series is starting to drag a little bit, but I do plan on eventually continuing, and then I think the final book is actually releasing either at the end of this year or early next year. But I met Jennifer L. Armentrout last year, and she was so sweet, and I just cannot wait to meet her again. And the last 2 authors are actually dark and contemporary romance authors, not fantasy romance. To be completely transparent, this is a very last-minute video, and when I was putting this list together, it was for my own personal needs. I was trying to color code a map for when I get to ApollyCon, and I completely forgot that I had 2 authors here that don't write fantasy romance. But they are still 2 amazing authors. This first one, I am already prepping myself to act normal. I feel like I'm not going to say a single word to them, and that is Penelope Douglas, the author of some of my absolute favorite books. I think I've read their entire backlist. The first book I read by them was Birthday Girl. That is a taboo, kind of age gap, ex-boyfriend's dad romance, Daddy Pike. So, so good. But my favorite has to be Credence by Penelope Douglas. This is either a love it or you hate it book. I was completely obsessed. Now, it is taboo. We are following Tiernan, and she has grown up in a house where she has been completely neglected. So she's really raised herself, and when her parents pass away, she is shipped off to a relative that she has never met, her Uncle Jake. So she ends up going to Colorado in the middle of nowhere, and soon finds out that she also has two step cousins. And all of them end up snowed in a cabin together, and it goes from there. So when I first read this, I will say, I didn't love who she ended up with. However, I've read this recently, I think last year, or reread it last year, and I'm more okay with her decision. But I absolutely love this book, pretty much everything I've read by Penelope Douglas. So another author I'm so, so excited to meet. And last up, we have QB Tyler. Now, I actually met QB Tyler at Indies Invade Philly, I think 2 years ago. She was the absolute sweetest, and I've read so many of her books since then. Her newest release is The Nanny is Off Limits. Now, I did download the audiobook, and I plan on listening to it on my drive down, because it's about a 3.5-hour drive to Washington from where I live. But I love a good nanny romance, and this is nanny and age gap. Couldn't be better. So I believe this is following Rowan, who is a single dad of 3 children, and he ends up having a romance with his nanny, who is over 10 years younger than him. So I feel like QB Tyler just writes amazing taboo romances, so I'm sure this is going to be a 5-star. All right, guys, those are all of the authors I am really looking forward to meeting at ApollyCon, as well as some of my favorite books by them. I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Leslie, Lotta, Kat, Kylie, Amanda, Jess, and the Sarah Andrea family. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.